Hello sports fans, my name is Professor S, and today we are talking history and we're talking economics. We're also going to take a page out of the Art Vandelay playbook, imports and exports. We're talking the Hawley-Smoot tariff, and we're doing it on Hasty History. But before we get to Hawley and Smoot, let's talk tariffs. What are they? A tariff is basically a tax on imports and exports. So when I say that the Hawley-Smoot tariff raised tariffs on imports in the United States, you know that means that it raised taxes on the stuff being brought into the United States by other countries to be sold. So that means that other countries are having to pay more money to sell their stuff in the US. That makes those other countries mad. But before we get too much into the specifics, let's talk context. In 1929, the Great Depression hits, and it makes everybody nervous. So what America wants to do is protect its workers from foreign competition. For example, the United States would much rather have a U.S. worker make something in a factory rather than the U.S. buying that same thing from another country, even if it's cheaper. Giving American money to other countries is not going to help stimulate the American economy. In economic terms, this is called protectionism. Willis Hawley and Reed Smoot were two politicians who figured that if the United States raised tariffs on imported goods, then that would give the American farmers and merchants a better shot at having competitive prices on their own American goods. These two guys introduced the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which was officially known as the Tariff Act of 1930. Now, the act passes both the House and the Senate because all of these politicians are trying to do right by the people that they represent and protect their workers. But the economists and the businessmen of the time, even people like Henry Ford, were pleading like crazy with President Herbert Hoover to veto the bill. Even President Hoover had concerns that raising tariffs and making it more expensive to import goods was going to make these other countries mad. And that was the last thing he wanted in the wake of World War I. Even so, eventually Hoover relents and he signs the bill. With the act passed and the tariffs raised, surprise, surprise, all the other countries get mad. All of a sudden, they're being told that if they want to sell their goods in the United States, they're going to have to pay an arm and a leg. Not only does this make the other countries mad to the point that they don't want to sell their goods in the United States anymore, it also makes them raise their own tariffs out of spite, so that if American importers and exporters want to sell their goods in other countries, now they have to pay an arm and a leg. At the end of the day, the Hawley-Smoot tariff did a lot more harm than good. See, it helped the U.S. a little bit in the short term, but in a globalized economy, something that helped the U.S. in the short term and hurt the rest of the world in the long term meant that the rest of the world in the short term wanted to see the U.S. hurt in the long term. Because the other countries raised their tariffs in response to the U.S. raising its tariffs, everybody's charging an arm and a leg in taxes. And this is smack dab in the middle of the Great Depression, when nobody can afford to be messing around like this. Finally, in 1932, Mr. Hawley and Mr. Smoot do not get reelected. But there is a guy running for President of the United States whose name is Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and he's running on the platform of lowering tariffs. So when FDR gets elected, he passes the Reciprocal Trade Agreements Act of 1934, and this lowers tariffs across the board. This helps to bring all the countries back to the table to play nice, economically speaking. This has been the Hawley-Smoot Tariff. This has been Hasty History. I have been Professor S, and you stay hasty, my friends.
Wow. The Wall Street Journal reports that some members of Congress are skeptical about the move. They say what farmers need is a stable trade environment, not government aid. It also reports some Republican senators worrying that aid might extend to other fields if Trump continues with his tariffs. The Hill reports one senator saying the Trump administration is leading the country back to the Great Depression. And Courts reports that criticism that Trump is paying the bill for tariffs with taxpayer money. And then from the New York Times, one senator suggesting the move would also prompt other fields hurt by trade frictions to ask for extra aid as well.
Port of South Louisiana, just west of New Orleans, is America's largest tonnage port. 280 million metric tons of cargo were handled here just last year.
I like to say that we're probably one of the most important ports that nobody ever heard of.
Port Director Paul O'Quinn sees storm clouds gathering over this stretch of the Mississippi River, where so much of America's business is done. Tariffs have been imposed, more are threatened, but their effects haven't been felt here just yet.
It has caused a lot of uncertainty. Everyone's a little unsure about what the future holds.
An hour's drive away south of New Orleans, the future has arrived at Elite Energy. U.S. steel tariffs have made the material these workers use to manufacture hydraulic fracturing equipment 25% more expensive.
Yes, we had to raise prices to keep up and to make our margins that we need to make. I'm not happy about it. It's affected us negatively, I guess. Certainly, I can tell you that it's created a lot of nervousness.
International trade lawyer Eddie Hayes says Louisiana, with its long import and export history, could be hit hard by U.S. tariffs and other countries' retaliatory measures. The Port of South Louisiana ships and receives cargo from more than 90 countries around the world. China is one of the top 5 import nations. China is also one of the top 5 commodity destinations. $5.7 billion worth of Louisiana exports to China are targeted for retaliation, according to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. That includes grain, crude oil, and petrochemicals.
When you have tariffs and the tariffs go into effect and people buy less grain, that's less tonnage. Less tonnage to us means less jobs. It's just that simple.
30,000 people work for O'Quinn's port or for one of the 67 companies located within the port district. He says $23 million in future job-generating port projects could also be affected as the price of steel goes up. Steel tariffs have already hurt one food service equipment manufacturer that was in New Orleans for a recent convention.
We're just seeing so many barriers. The cost for us to do business, we're almost getting completely thrown out of the market in Canada.
WGSO. Here in Louisiana, which backed President Trump in 2016, there are mixed feelings about the current trade disputes.
We have a lot of conservative businessmen and women down here in Louisiana. We voted heavily in favor of Trump as a community, and you see a lot of uneasiness in their facial expressions and in their discussions.
Some blame China for the situation.
So I think that's given them a little bit of a lifeline for now.
One businessman who's feeling the pinch argues the tariffs were imposed too quickly.
I don't think it can keep going too much longer like this, but we'll see.
Many believe political pressure from places like Louisiana will eventually force the U.S. and its trade partners to hammer out a solution. That's the hope, anyway, in this trade-dependent area where the future looks murky at the moment.
It is like a big cloud hanging over the area, and we just want the sun to peek through and make things rosy again.
Hendrik Sabrandi, CGTN, Reserve, Louisiana.
Making tremendous progress. They're all coming. They don't want to have those tariffs put on them. They're all coming to see us. And the farmers will be the biggest beneficiary. Watch. We're opening up markets. You watch what's going to happen.